Hello everyone, and welcome back for the next devlog for Pixel Pirates. There have been quite a few changes made over these last few weeks, so without further ado, let's just get straight into things. First up is an obvious change, and that's redesigning some of those tile textures in the game. During the last few weeks, I was away from my main computer, so I couldn't work on the game nearly as much as I wanted to, but while traveling, I did take my laptop around and decided to revamp the textures a little bit. I think this little change makes the game feel a little bit more vibrant and a little less monotone and less gray than the previous textures were, which, of course, is a good thing. These are obviously just temporary for now, and without a doubt will be changed later when I get more inspiration or when I got some more progress to show. For now, though, I think they look pretty good, but let me know what you guys think as well. The next change I made is one that'll be very important later on visually, because it separates the player's sprite into multiple different sections. Before, I had a sprite sheet made up of 12 different animations, which, when arranged correctly in the animation window, made the character look like they're actually moving around, which is an important part of any game. Now, however, I have 60 unique animations to achieve the same visual look. However, now the sprite is animated as 5 separate parts: the legs, the core, the left and right arms, and of course the head. By separating the sprites in this way and having the same textures but split up, I can achieve a more realistic visual of depth for when I add things like weapons. So if I add a weapon now, and let's say they're carrying it in their right arm, with the old system, it would either be entirely in front of the sprite or entirely behind the sprite. Of course, we want it to be in front of, like, if it's in the right hand, we want it to be in front of the left hand and the core and the head, but we want it behind the right hand to make it look like, he's holding it. So, with this new system, we actually are able to simulate it being behind the right hand layer, but being in front of all the other layers. So it just makes the animations look a little bit cleaner and a little easier to add a bunch of different variations later. So I kind of like that. Splitting up this player sprite will be useful later on when it comes to holding items, but it also allows me to add some character customization options as well. This could include things like different hair colors, eye colors, and skin tones. This will hopefully also make equipment items like different shirts, pants, and hats a simple-ish addition to the game. But now that I've said that, I know it's not going to be as simple as I want it to be, but the idea seems pretty simple, so I'm confident. A brief break from our regularly scheduled programming to ask, if you haven't yet, please consider liking the video and maybe even subscribing. It really means a lot to me and shows that y'all like what I'm actually doing. If you have any comments about things you like, dislike, or that I should add, please share them with me. I love hearing from all of you, and I want to make sure my supporters' voices are heard. Now, after that quick intermission, back to the show. So far, Pixel Pirates is an amazing game filled with things like walking around a much too large world, not a single boat in sight, and an inventory that is largely useless since you can't actually open any containers to get those items. Those first two things will be fixed in time, but at least now we actually have interactable objects, and more specifically, interactable chests. These chests are no longer fancy-looking lawn ornaments, although I guess you could use it as one if you really wanted to get robbed, but actually interactable objects that will drop loot. If we walk over to my secret little clearing to the northeast of the spawning beach, we see a very fancy-looking clearing with a campfire, a red potion, and a chest. As we saw from earlier devlogs, we can actually pick up this potion and it gets added to our inventory. We're able to move it around and things like that, like you would expect with a normal inventory. If we walk up to the top of the clearing, however, we see a little icon that appears on top of our player, indicating that an interactable object is nearby. If we click the interactable keybind, we see that the chest opens up and a blue potion pops down in front of it. We are then free to pick up this potion and move it all around our inventory like we would any other object. Alongside this chest addition, I've also made the chest state save with the save controller, so that way the player can't cheat and get an infinite number of useless blue potions. Now that we can interact with a chest, it only makes sense that we can actually talk to the people we're stealing from. If we head north from the beach, we'll come across a lonely village with a friendly NPC outside enjoying the day. We see that she has a set movement path, and she'll continue to cycle along this path forever, which sounds kinda lonely to me, but she hasn't complained to me about it yet, so I think it's probably fine. Speaking of talking, if we do actually get close enough to her, we actually see that same visual indicator from earlier with the chest pop up onto our screen saying that, hey, there's an interactable object nearby. If we talk to her using that same interact key from earlier, we see that she stops moving and begins speaking her very serious dialogue to us. Whenever we're done talking to her, we can then exit out and she continues on her merry day, pleased with her newfound talent of speaking. While I'm not completely sure as to the scope of this game and where all it'll be released when it eventually does go to market, I want to make sure players have options for how they choose to play. From the time I was a kid to just about a year ago, I only played games on console with a controller. Even now, when I'm playing games on PC, I often end up plugging in my old Xbox controller and playing it like that because that's what I grew up with and brings back nostalgia of gaming to me. That's why I'm making sure I'm using Unity's input manager to work with keybinds. If you're playing with mouse and keyboard, you can move around with the classic WASD keys, and if you're on controller, you can move around with left stick. Want to open the inventory? Use either tab on the keyboard or select on the controller. Or is it start? Use the one on the left, whichever that one is. Interact is either E on keyboard or X on the Xbox. I want to make sure the game feels very good on any platform it may release on, and I want to make sure that the input system is consistently used so that way anybody using any input system can have an enjoyable time. Plus, it makes so that way if those random people who used to play games with like Guitar Hero guitars and stuff like that can try to beat the game, they have the chance to, which I think would be cool. With all that said, I think that's everything of note that I worked on in these last few weeks. We're starting to finally get into the fun part of this game design process, where now that the fundamental systems are laid out, I can really begin to let the imagination fly when adding new things. Now that interactions are in the game, I can see a few different ways as to how I could go about entering and captaining a boat. With the player sprite chopped up into pieces, I think it's finally time our player gets his sword. I'm so excited to continue working on this game and seeing it finally come to life. But for now, I think it's time I put down the mic and actually get back to working on the game. I hope y'all enjoyed this video and you'll stick around for the next one. See ya!